You're listening to Milwaukee Mafia, your podcast dose of Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fox City's Murder and Mayhem. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, are we talking about a Exorcist today?
We are.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
This has been an Eric waiting for a long time.
Yes. I'm still, there's one more thing I'm waiting on, but I don't think it's going to really change the episode. So, yeah, we can go for it.
All right. So who are we talking about? I want you to try and pronounce the name because I can't pronounce the name. So.
I actually think I know this one.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's a priest. So his title is Father. His first name is Theophilus.
Theophilus. I would not have gone with that.
See, and I would have said Theophilus, but this one I looked up. Apparently it's Theophilus.
Okay.
His last name, that one's the part that's tricky to me. It could be Riesinger, it could be Reisinger. I don't know. But I'm going to call him Theophilus, so it doesn't really matter. I'll call him Father Theophilus.
Okay.
So, yeah. This is a story. Well, you start. How did you hear this story?
So, one of the things that me and my wife like to do when there's nothing else to do, like typically on a weekend we hike all the time. So when we don't have a hike, we'll just find some random place to go to in the area and just hang out for the day. And we went to, there's an asylum park in Oshkosh, which is where the location of the original, not like because I believe there's a, whatever they call it now, place in Oshkosh today, but where the original one was located is now a city park. And when I was doing research into that city park, somebody had gone to this city park and then continued on to Appleton, and one of the things they did was tried to find Father Theophilus' grave.
Okay.
So then that's just turned me on to like, who is this guy? They mentioned that he had done Exorcist. They had even mentioned in their blog posting that the Exorcist was based on him, which I think you said is probably not true.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
But yeah, so that, and then what do I do when I discover something cool locally in Appleton? I tell Gavin, and then Gavin takes it from there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned this to me, and my response, I don't remember exactly, but it was probably something along the lines of, what?
that was pretty much it.
That can't be a thing. And it is completely a thing. There is right now in St. Joseph Cemetery in Appleton, the grave of Father Theophilus, and he was an exorcist. It's completely true.
And if I'm not mistaken, did an insane amount of exorcists, right?
Allegedly, yes. Yeah.
I mean, like.
So, so this surprised me because I had never heard that. I had never heard there was an exorcist in Appleton. I was not familiar with his name. I have no idea how that story was never told to me. And as far as I can tell, really isn't like known well around here at all. I mean, listeners can correct me. Maybe they'll be like, oh, I knew about that. But I feel like that's not a story that people tell.
Yeah, and I would say that, and maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but this is the only... I've brought other stories to you, and generally, like, the other stories that I've brought to you has been like, oh, yeah, that's going to be our next episode. Something like that.
Yeah.
And this is the first one where you were like, what?
Yeah, this was completely unheard of to me. And, so I started doing some looking, and there's stuff out there. So I was able to put together an episode I think people are going to enjoy. They've been listening this far. But yeah, like I said, I don't think he was really well known. And I even, like, looking at the Post-Crescent archives, the local newspaper archives, it doesn't even really seem like they mentioned that he was an exorcist until like 1973. Like then when like the Exorcist movie came out, they were like, oh, by the way. But like the whole time he was living, and he lived in Appleton for like 30 years. he'd make the paper for doing, random priest things, but they'd never be like, that exorcist guy. Like, nobody seemed to think that was, like, newsworthy.
So like, and maybe that's exactly it. Maybe this just was a thing that they ignored until the movie came out, and then it became popularized and people started talking about it.
Yeah,
That's weird.
So let's dive in here. Father Theophilus is born in 1868 in Bavaria, Germany, so the southern part of Germany. When he was born, his name was Francis Xavier. Theophilus is the name he took later when he became a priest. He was raised on a family farm, and he became deeply devoted to God during a prolonged illness that he had around age 12. I don't know what the illness was, but apparently he got very, very sick, turned to God for, help. He got better, and he's like, all right, that's the deal I made. I'm going to devote my life to you.
Mm-hmm.
At age 21, he entered the monastery in Germany and came to know a man there named Brother Conrad, who was later made a saint. Not going to go into that, but you can look up Brother Conrad, and there is a monk that later became a saint. For whatever reason, the local authority, the local father overseeing things, really didn't care for Theophilus. He's like, you don't fit in here. I'm not going to make you a priest locally. So he moved to another part of Germany to study for another year, graduated in February 1892. He did very, very good in his priestly studies. His school record says, quote, diligence and behavior always exemplary, intellectual attainments gratifyingly successful.
Wow.
Yes. Another professor wrote that this student distinguished himself by untiring diligence apparently his thing, and inflexible energy, as well as by modest demeanor and holy enthusiasm for his future vocation. His moral rectitude, no less than his gratifying achievements in the various branches of study, give every promise that, with God's help, his heart's most cherished desire will be fulfilled.
I'm assuming that this is when all of this comes from when he moved to the other part of Germany. And
yes.
This is not
the first. This is the second part of Germany.
Yeah, because I was going to say the first guy who's not going to make him a priest probably wouldn't have that flattering of things to
don't know
say.
the details of why the first guy wasn't going to, make him ordained, but the second place he went to, apparently the people there liked him a lot more.
Yeah, apparently.
1892, after completing his schooling in Germany, he comes to the United States, where he becomes a Capuchin monk. This is likely when he adopted the name Theophilus. Why he picked that name in particular, I don't know. There's a couple people in like ancient times with that name. There's someone in like the Gospel of Luke with that name. So it's a name that shows up in very old Christian sources, but it's definitely not like your common name.
Mm-hmm.
So
is this something that monks just do? Do they when you become a monk, do you just pick a name? Like from scripture or something?
I have to tell you, I'm not super sure, but I think that's probably a thing they do. I know there's at least one other guy in here who changes his name as well. I do know. I mean, it's very common with nuns. Like sisters almost always will change their names.
Okay.
So
it seems reasonable that a monk would do this, would have the same practice.
Right.
Well.
And that's the thing is, like, I've never met a monk that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. I've known many priests, and the priests are just their name. Mm-hmm. Like if you're Father Timothy, you were born Timothy. Mm-hmm. Like they don't typically change their name. So I'm not super familiar with how like the monks work. We don't have like a big, maybe we do, but not that I'm aware of. We don't have a big monastery around here. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so he briefly stays at a monastery in New York City. Then he goes to Yonkers in New York. He continues his journey on to Detroit. He finally gets ordained a priest officially in June 1899, and he is assigned back at St. Fidelis Monastery in New York. He's there for a couple years. August 1903, he goes to St. Michael's Monastery in New York, and apparently was very influential there. This was a traditional German church, so he fit right in. A lot of times Catholic churches, officially they're Catholic, and in the old days, they would do their services in Latin, but there's still traditions. So if you're German, you'd largely go to a German church. So he's fitting right in. He's like, I know the Germans. While he was there, he helped remodel the building. He established a sewing circle for young women. He started a kindergarten there, and even the local St. Vincent de Paul Society. So he really got that place up and going. Yeah.
Okay.
1909, he becomes a U.S. citizen while living in New York. In 1910, he's still living in New York. He's living in Manhattan, and he takes a course on socialism at Fordham University. He felt this was very important to understand because many of the young men who came to his church were laborers, and socialism was growing at this time. Labor unions were really taking off in the early 1900s, and he wanted to learn more about it. Officially, at this point in time, the Catholic Church said that socialism was a false doctrine and it was evil. So he wanted to understand what it was and how to tell his parishioners, please don't do that. In 1912, his view of evil spirits brought him into conflict with the local diocese authorities. And for non-Catholic people, like a diocese is like the bishop who oversees a region.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what his view of evil spirits was. It doesn't explain that. But whatever it was, apparently, was not what you were supposed to feel about that. So in 1912, they said, all right, you're getting out of here. We're going to send you to Wisconsin. And you are banished to Wisconsin for the rest of your life.
Like you do.
Like you do.
Like New York, that's what they do. Oh, you're punished, so we're going to send you to the worst place in the world, Wisconsin.
That is right. So it's 1912. They're like, you're weird. Get out of here. So this is when he starts showing up like in the Wisconsin newspapers. And it's, like I said, it's pretty tame. At one point, he's stationed in Appleton. He's shown speaking at like a Catholic society meeting in Kimberly, Wisconsin, right next to Appleton. And really what he's known for at this time is being a missionary, and not a missionary in the sense where like he's going to Africa or something, but missions were these things where a priest, or usually it seems like he's always with another guy, two priests will go around and they'll be put up for a week or two at a church, and they'll have these big, basically revivals, these big exciting things to try to get people to show up. Mm-hmm. They strongly encourage non-Catholics to show up. And there'd be advertisements in the newspaper, and they're like, do you work with Catholics? Are you dating a Catholic? Do you think they're weird? Come on to the mission and see what it's all about. So,
all right.
So he'd go and he'd help lead those. And in some cases, they would do two services back to back. One the normal way, and then one like a German way, apparently. And again, I don't really know what that means, but because Wisconsin was so heavily German, apparently those were popular in places. A lot of the time he's stationed in Appleton out of St. Joseph's. Part of the time he's in Marathon County, Wisconsin, because he does help establish St. Anthony's Seminary there. The person he's going on the missions with tends to be a man named Reverend Fabian Fetha. And sorry if I'm goofing up that name.
I think it's reasonable to goof up that name because it sounds pretty weird.
Yeah.
So,
and again, like this. So this is the other guy whose name was different. Like he was born as Anthony, but he's Father Fabian. Hmm. So for whatever reason, he chose Fabian as his name that he goes around. And yeah, these guys, pretty much every time you see advertisements, it's these two guys advertised together, bouncing around Wisconsin. And they go a little bit farther, sometimes Minnesota, on one occasion as far as even Nebraska. So they bounce around a little bit. By 1930, we learned this much, much later. Like, at the time, this was not public. But by 1930, he would later reflect that he had probably performed around 20 exorcisms at that point.
Wow.
On many occasions, he went ahead and performed the ceremony, even when the local bishop told him not to do it.
So now, I guess I don't know this, but I guess based on what you're saying, it sounds like in Catholic religion's eyes, an exorcist was something you should not be doing at this point in time?
Not necessarily. So I'm going to be careful how I say this, because I by no means an expert in what priests are taught. So I don't want to misspeak here. There are official Catholic rites of exorcism.
Okay.
Like, I don't know that every priest learns them, but it is an actual thing that the church has with steps on how you're supposed to do it and things like that. So it's not that they're opposed to it. It's just that it's supposed to be rare. The church, as even more so today, like today, the church will more often than not say, before we even look at them, send them to a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
But even back at this point, 100 years ago, there's still like, possessions happen, but they don't happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're running into a dozen possessed people in your life, something is wrong.
Because there may be some falsity to a lot of these claims, because it's just not that common.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, and it's like, it's not that they don't think possessions happen, and it's not that they don't think they should be dealt with. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Bible itself. This was a thing. This is for people at home. I know I told Eric the other day, and Eric was really like weirded out by it. But I do like a Bible study every night before I go to bed, and like that's a thing. That's like a thing that Jesus would do. Like, there was one occasion where Jesus performed an exorcism, and he got the bad spirits to come out of a person, and he sent them into pigs, and the pigs went crazy, and the pigs ran full force into the water and drowned themselves to get rid of the evil spirits. So priests, in theory, are supposed to have some of the powers of Christ. Like, not on that level. They're not divine,
Mm-hmm.
but they, that's why you can like confess to a priest, and it's like confessing to God directly.
Mm-hmm.
Some Catholic priests listening are going to be like, "You are misrepresenting this," and I'm sorry. I'm like,
But hey, if there is a Catholic priest listening and we are misrepresenting, please contact us and we'll put you on the podcast so you can get it all right for us.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, anything I say, like, take it with a grain of salt, because although I was raised Catholic, like, I am not a priest. I was not trained as a priest, so I'm going to use some of the terms incorrectly. Like, sorry, but
so what we gather from this is basically that an exorcism is very much something that is, in the eyes of the Catholic Church, this is a thing that can be done, should be done. But
it can be done, it should be done, but it should be done very rarely, because more often than not, you can find an explanation for it without having to resort to the devil.
Gotcha.
That like I said, at this point, by 1930, that's apparently, he would later claim he had done around 20 exorcisms at that point, none of which had been made public, and apparently some of which the local bishop told him not to do, but he decided, well, this needs to be done, so he does it. He's continuing to go on these missions. In August, September, and December is the big exorcism that August, September, December 1928 is the big exorcism that he becomes known for. And it's weird to me that, like, he'll do it for a week, then he'll leave, he'll come back, do it for a week, he'll leave, and then he comes back and does it for a week. Like, I don't know what the possessed person is doing when he leaves. If he's just like, just hang out here, I'll be back. But like, what's really weird, like, it wasn't known at the time that he was, again, this didn't make the newspapers or anything. But all the missions he was going on were making the news because they'd advertise them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny because I know what dates he was performing this exorcism, and I know what days he was on these missions. And for like the couple weeks that he was gone during the exorcism, he's on these missions. And I like, this is so weird to me. Like, he's like, all right, I'm going to do an exorcism for a week. I'll be back. I got to go run this mission in Nebraska. He goes out there, gets people excited to be Catholic, and comes back and says, all right, let's get back to this. Like, that's so weird to me. Like, because these, obviously the missions are important. You know, you want to get people excited about being Catholic, but it's funny that he's, the whole time he's doing that, he's got to be in the back of his mind being like, there's like a possessed person waiting for me.
Well, and you almost have to wonder too. I would go with the thought process in this situation that we don't know how an exorcism works.
Not exactly.
Very well. So
yeah.
maybe what he's doing is he's doing an exorcism, and then he's like, okay, now I gotta go, but let's see how this sticks, or let's see if the spirit returns, and then when on returnal, if the spirit is still there, we're gonna try this step or whatever.
Okay.
You know? I mean, that would make sense to me.
That's possible. So that's on and off August through December 1928. Okay.
Do you know why? What makes, or are we coming to what makes this the one he's really known for?
That's the next thing I'm going to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So while this is going on, he goes on the missions. Afterwards, he's going on the missions. And then around February 1936, so this is what? Math. 8 years later, after this, the one that he becomes famous for, a pamphlet gets released in Germany called Begone Satan. And then it's translated into English and comes to America. And you can pick up your local, go to your bookstore and pick up a copy of this book called Begone Satan, which I'm showing Eric right now.
The documented and true story of the second exorcism of twice-possessed Emma Schmidt, Anna Eklund in Erlin, Iowa.
Yes. So you can get that on Amazon or wherever. It is in print. So this comes out, and now it's made known that for 23 days, divided up into 3 different sittings, he was battling the devil in Iowa, where a woman had been possessed for over 25 years.
Wow.
When the pamphlet came out, it was instantly controversial. The local bishop said that some of it was inaccurate and some of it was exaggerated. So the bishop was like, this is not how this goes. According to the book, the woman who was possessed, we don't know who she was. The priest knew who she was, but they didn't make her name public. I mean, this was a very private affair, so it wasn't known. In the book, they call her Anna Eklund. That's just a name they made up to give her a name.
Mm-hmm.
That's not her name. Other people have tried to figure it out, and they've said that this matches up with who they think a person named Emma Schmidt was. No relation. And, but it's not super convincing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, different people have said, oh, it seems like she was born in 1882, 1886, 1894. The book says that she's from the east, or in other places, 1,000 miles from Iowa. Some people have said she was from Milwaukee. Some say she was from Detroit. So it's the facts of who she was are very vague.
Mm-hmm.
We do know, according to the book, that Father Theophilus had met her before in June 1912 and had previously tried to exorcise this demon at that time. Now, the thing is, this times out really well, because if he tried to exorcise her in June 1912, and we know that in 1912, the New York church kicked him out of New York and sent him to Wisconsin because of these weird beliefs he had in evil spirits. That makes sense.
That he probably did this.
That he might have actually met her all the way over in New York, and because of whatever he did with this young woman, they kicked him out of New York. Again, we don't know, because it's so many vague things here about who this person is, but that's an interesting time that overlaps for me. So I'm like, maybe people are assuming that he met her previously in Milwaukee or somewhere in Wisconsin, but actually this goes way back to his New York days.
And that does sound like pretty compelling timing, that it would seem very reasonable.
Yeah.
When does he do the Exorcist on her the second time, when the one he's famous for?
1928.
So literally, like, he tried to do this Exorcist in what you said, 1912?
1912.
And then he waited another...
It didn't take, and then for whatever reason in 1928, she wants it done, gets a hold of him. He makes arrangements to have her put on a train and brought to Iowa. And it says, like, he had to alert the train personnel. He's like, I don't want anybody to know that this young lady is coming, but I have to tell the train people, because if she freaks out on the train, they should probably know about this. So apparently the train people were told. And somehow, presumably from one of these missions, he knew the local priest in this small town in Iowa, and he arranged to bring her there because it would be like a place that was kind of remote. So the train brought her to Iowa, and they put her in the convent there. So she was surrounded by the nuns the whole time. Nobody in this small town in Iowa was supposed to know what was going on. But apparently everybody knew what was going on, because there was like screaming coming out of the convent every night for weeks on end. And like, that's sort of suspicious. According to the book, the young lady, well, I guess she's not even a young lady anymore at this point, but the woman was possessed by Beelzebub, Judas Iscariot, as well as her own father Jacob, and Jacob's mistress Mina. All of them would talk to the priests. Beelzebub explained that he had been a high-ranking angel before he fell to hell. Judas said that he was possessing the young woman because he was trying to get her to go into complete despair and kill herself.
Wow.
Jacob, her father, told the priest how he had ridiculed priests in his life, and when given the chance to confess before dying, he spit in that priest's face and laughed as he was damned. Mina said that she, in addition to having an affair with Jacob, she had murdered little ones. And when they asked her how many little ones she murdered, she said 3. And then she said, no, wait, it was 4. So
gotta get that right, huh?
Lost track of how many kids she killed there. It was determined that even though the first time this exorcism tried to happen was in 1912, she had apparently been possessed as far back as 1908, when this Mina woman, who was considered by local people to be a witch, put a curse on her, and then later this curse was strengthened because her father repeatedly tried to commit incest with his daughter. She successfully fought him off, but then he cursed her because she wouldn't agree. This, I gotta tell you, for a pamphlet that came out in the 30s and is supposed to be a very religious book, there's some racy stuff in here. Like, they don't shy away from some very nasty material. So, it's interesting reading for sure. The demon Beelzebub wanted to let everybody know that Satan was taking over the world, and they asked him for proof, and he said, "Do you remember a few years ago when there was a revolution in Mexico? That was us." So, okay.
All right.
He further claimed that the Antichrist had already been born in Israel, but had not reached maturity yet, and humanity would see the final days of the world in the year 2000. So, apparently he was wrong about that
Yeah.
one. But,
or we thwarted it.
yeah. The local priest who's normally lived in Iowa kind of worked as the assistant on this, and he was constantly being attacked and assaulted by the demon. At one point, he had apparently gone temporarily blind while he was in his car, and he drove off the side of a bridge.
Wow. It survived?
And survived. When his sight returned, his vehicle was hanging off the edge of the bridge, and they were able to get him back to safety. The demon could tell if holy water had secretly been sprinkled into the woman's food, and explained that the devil knew people's secrets, except if they had been confessed to a priest. Then the secrets would be blocked. So if you did something evil, the devil knows you've done it. But if you confess to the priest, then the devil doesn't know you did it anymore.
Interesting.
Yes. The woman, while possessed, could rise from the bed, floating on only her heels, and she could jump and cling to the walls by her fingertips. She would vomit up to 20 or 30 times a day, which was far more than she was actually eating.
Weird.
On the last day, before the woman was free of the possession, Lucifer himself appeared before Father Theophilus, holding a sword and covered in flames. He said, "You have defeated me," and then he vanished.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Father Theophilus never spoke of this or any other exorcism publicly. He did say that he wrote down his experiences and sent them to the Vatican, and that's all he would ever say. As the Vatican chooses to release it, that's their decision, but I won't talk about it. So, somewhere in the Vatican archives, there could be a really interesting diary. Yeah. So, he continues to be a priest at St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Appleton for another 26 years after this. And later on, they would, again, he kind of got known when the Exorcist movie came out, which is decades later.
Mm-hmm.
A former student, Oscar Dorn, was interviewed, and he said, "When he talked about hell and damnation, you listened." Another student said, "I never remember him making a joke or engaging in light conversation. He was a very serious man." Father Theophilus died on November 9th, 1941, at age 73, after suffering an attack during performing Mass in Menasha. He was said to be buried on a hillside in St. Joseph's Cemetery. If that was true, either he or the hill has been moved.
Because he is very much not on a hill.
He is very much not on a hill. For people who are curious, if you enter the cemetery on the St. Joseph side, so not driving through the Riverside side,
Yep.
And you stick to your left, it's not very far in on the road on the left-hand side. And there's a little section with a monument that says this is where the Capuchins are, and he's surrounded by Capuchins. It's not a very notable
Yeah, it's a flat gravestone.
It's a flat gravestone, yeah.
So-
It's definitely not on a hill. So either it was on a hill and they filled in the hill to make more grave space, or they moved the grave, or this account is wrong.
Mhm.
I don't know which it is, but either way, that's where he is now and probably where he will stay. So he is absolutely buried in Appleton. At his passing, a fellow missionary gave the description, "I was on the missions with Father Theophilus for 22 years. He was always considerate of the failings and shortcomings of others. His correction was fatherly and sincere. He always had an encouraging word for his brothers and rejoiced in their success. He was ever ready to substitute for or take over the work of another. In his prime, he preached 5 or even 7 times a day without complaint. nor did these duties prevent him from saying his breviary, rosary, and stations every day. I don't know what a breviary is. Catholics should know what the rosary is and the Stations of the Cross. While traveling and in the rectory, he was a pleasant companion. He was an interesting entertainer and well-liked by priests and people. So this is what they wrote about him at his passing. They don't actually identify who said this, which I think is weird, but I'm fairly confident that it's Father Fabian.
Yeah, probably the guy that spent all the time with him.
Yeah,
really, right?
when it says I was on the missions with him for 22 years, I'm like, well, there's really only one guy that can be. When The Exorcist came out, the movie, interest was renewed. A man from the Des Moines Register traveled to Iowa to get the inside scoop. The Exorcist was making headlines and it had people talking. The local priest there noted that Erling had only 573 people in 1974. Not many, but we have a lot of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, you know, and they all remembered, and they said that the woman had been brought in from Michigan, a different place than others identified as the eastern city. Again, I don't know. I don't know if she's from Detroit. No idea. And I don't know how the townsfolk would know, but either way. The local priest said, in a small town like this, everyone knew what was going on, but it was no big thing, nothing sensational. Now it seems to be a big thing, at least for outsiders. With the book and movie out, we're getting visits from newsmen and photographers from all over. 2 letters just this morning, one from Arizona and one from Rome, wanting to know about the 1928 exorcism. There never has been a formal investigation or report on this case, and it has been exaggerated. The reporter found another priest who had been an assistant to the local priest in the 1930s. This priest said, one time Father Stager was returning from a farm home after delivering communion on First Friday when a black curtain came down in front of him and he crashed his new car into a bridge, completely wrecking it. So he was personally told the car crashing story from the priest, so apparently like that part is accurate. Up in the convent room, the devil told the exorcist, I fixed your partner. Another time, Father Stager heard rats running up the wall of his bedroom. He put on his clothes, blessed the room, and then there were no more rats. Sister Lita, the principal of the Catholic school in town, said most of the nuns have slept in the exorcism room of the convent. She says, I have slept there, and probably dozens of other nuns have slept there too. Everyone who lives at the convent knows about the bedroom, but nothing unusual has ever happened there that I know of. She says, it's just fiction. I don't believe in those things. It's a weird thing for a nun to say, but... yeah,
So is she basically saying she doesn't believe that the exorcism ever happened there?
I think she thinks that it happens, but I don't think she thinks that it's this big thing that they're making it out to be. Especially with the movie, The Exorcist, coming out. Now, don't get me wrong, the book has the girl floating, clinging to walls, vomiting. So it's not like there's not weird stuff going on. But people familiar with the Exorcist movie, like, that's taking it to a whole nother level.
Well, and that's Hollywooding it.
Right.
Right. I mean, in reality.
Right. Now, so... as to originally, you said, like, was it an influence or the source for, like, The Exorcist? Officially, no. So the Exorcist book and movie are based on a completely different case of a young man, actually. And we know who that was. Like, that young man who was possessed, like, he grew up, and strangely, he went to be an employee at NASA when he got older. So, like he's known. We know who he was. But people have claimed, and I do think there's some level of validity to this, that this had to have been some kind of an influence on it.
Well, and just what you said, some of the stuff that you said, I have seen The Exorcist. It's been years, so I don't remember the movie great, but like the walls and the throwing up and stuff, that was all in the movie, right? I'm pretty sure that
yeah.
whoever, and I feel like, am I wrong? Wasn't it a female in the movie too?
Yeah, absolutely. So like that's the thing. Like officially, the movie is based on the book, The Exorcist, and the Exorcist book is based on this case of this young man. But I have to suspect that when the guy who wrote the book, his name is Bill Blatty. He's passed now, but anyway, but he had to have like researched exorcisms while he wrote the book, and it seems likely that he found this reference, in the Begone Satan book or pamphlet or whatever you want to call it, because I don't think there's that many published accounts of real life exorcisms out there. And I'm not an expert by any means, but I suspect prior to the book The Exorcist, there probably weren't too many fictional accounts of exorcisms either. So my guess is, like, even though this was not the case that it was based off of, there had to have been some things from here that trickled in there.
Right, because obviously they're going to do some research, and your little pamphlet that you have there is probably a very good research piece to use while you're trying to research and create a script for this movie.
Yeah. So the short answer is this what The Exorcist is based off of? No. But the long answer is partially, probably. So
I'm just curious.
So if anybody like wants to go to the gravesite and they're like, "Oh, this is the guy that inspired The Exorcist," that is not true. If you say it like that, that is not true. But there's probably pieces that worked their way in.
Do you have any idea, like in the research, have you seen how many notable exorcists have been written about that are supposedly real life? So we know this, and then we know the guy that, quote, The Exorcist book is based on.
Right.
Did you run into, like, is there a lot of instances of them writing about this? Or
no. So I really tried to do an extra thorough job on this one. This is probably, I don't know. You got the computer in front of you. I'm guessing we're running longer than usual.
Oh, yeah, we definitely are.
Okay. But I'm okay with that because I wanted this one to be really thorough. And so I was going out there and I'm finding like chapters of books and scholarly articles. Like I want to find every reference I can to this. And it does seem that when people write about exorcisms and they're writing it like as like a college paper or something, there's very few. I mean, there's this one, there's the one The Exorcist is based off of, and then there's maybe one or two others. Like, those are the ones that are brought up again and again and again. Like, I don't know how common exorcism is, but the ones that are publicly known are extremely rare.
And that's so fascinating that he claims to have done 20 to 30 of them in his life. That's weird.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he must have just been going all over the place finding people to do this on. So, I don't know, man. This is a crazy story. And, okay, now, go back to your book.
Yeah.
So, now the guy that... I see that it looks like it's written by a father.
It is.
Right? Or a reverend, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, whatever.
But, I mean... So, is that the guy that was actually the Iowa... Like, who would have been his assistant or whatever?
No, and that's the weird thing. It's not written by Father Theophilus, and it's not written by the guy in Iowa. So I don't know how they told this guy. And this guy is in Germany. This guy wrote this in Germany, and it found its way back to America and got translated.
Okay, yeah, you did say that. I'm sorry.
So I do not know how the guy in Germany heard any of this story.
So that's kind of suspect.
Because again, Father Theophilus is claiming that he's not going around telling people. Mm-hmm. Although he seems like he'd be the most likely person to tell a guy in Germany.
Yeah,
he's saying that he's not telling anybody. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, but and I mean, I have very strong doubts about some of the things in the book. But it's clear, I mean, at the very core of it, some of it is true. Like when it came out, they were like, well, yeah, there was an exorcism here. So it's not made up,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't know on the particulars how he got the information he got.
Did you go as far as to like research like news articles in Iowa around this time to see like what people, because like you said, people were saying that there was screaming coming
I
from
don't think it was reported because I could not find like up until after the book comes out, and then later on when the Exorcist movie comes out, the only time Theophilus is in the news is when he's running the missions, or just some random small thing where it's like, oh, he's at a meeting of the local whatever. Like, there's never any mention of him doing things. There's no mention of him being in that small town in Iowa, which isn't really surprising because if there's only 500 people there, I'm guessing they probably didn't even have a local newspaper.
No, that's fair, yeah.
So, I don't know exactly what people knew at the time, like publicly, but it does seem like keeping it in the small town was a good idea as far as trying to not cover up, it's not the right term, but keep contained the story.
The story and the history.
Yeah.
God, that is so fascinating. And this is, once again, how many more stories are we going to discover in Appleton like this that we both just would have never guessed?
I don't know. But
I mean, this podcast has been amazing for that.
Yeah.
We got the religious cult UFO center.
Yeah.
We got what was the thing out in, what was it, New London? The cryogenics chamber.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, like there has been throughout time some crazy stuff that has happened, all based in Appleton.
Yep. And I mean, to be clear, we don't have any evidence of there being any exorcisms in Appleton, but just having the priest be stationed out of Appleton and still be buried here today, that in itself is an interesting connection. So.
That is a very interesting connection, and the priest has also made the statement that he did, or somebody has made the statement that he did 20 in his life.
Yeah.
It seems very reasonable that one of them happened in Appleton.
Oh, let's not jump to conclusions. I don't know.
Yeah, that's absolutely, it's very possible that none of them happened
Wouldn't
here.
That be cool? But I don't know.
But I mean, either way, this is a piece of Appleton history that's, I think, nobody knows. Or very, very few
people know.
So,
yeah.
So, all right. Well, with that, you got anything else you want to add to this, or?
Nope, not at this time. Like I said, there was one more thing I was waiting on, but it wouldn't really change the courses. There was a scholarly article that's titled something like "The Real Story of the Erling Exorcism." So maybe it would have had a bit more background depending on what they could find. And I'm waiting on that. I put a request in for that. So, but as far as this story, we're good, I think. If there's something really big that comes up, we'll do a follow-up. But otherwise, I think we're good.
Interesting. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that one, because this one, I think it was on Eric's list as one of his favorite of the Fox Cities Murder and Mayhem episodes we've done. So
cool.
So maybe that's just because I found it and it was a story Gavin didn't know.
Nope.
But
Nope. Well, I'm glad you did find it, because it was exciting to make that connection there.
So, all right, then with that, we will wrap this episode up, and we want to thank everybody for the continued support of the podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Milwaukee Mafia Podcast. Join us next time for another look back at Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey Amazon selling enthusiast, it's Eric here, and if you're tired of the inventory management struggle, I've got a game changer for you. InventoryLab.com. Inventory Lab simplifies e-commerce, inventory management, integrates seamlessly with Amazon, and even syncs effortlessly with QuickBooks for hassle-free accounting. Go to krmpods.com/IL now, because your success deserves efficient inventory management. Happy selling.